And for more on the current events in Syria, I can bring in now Nanara Hawatch, a senior analyst for Syria at the International Crisis Group. Good morning, Nana, and thank you very much for joining us. Can I start by asking if the violence of the past few days is a sign of Syria fracturing in the post-Assad era?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. The past few days, the violence, I would say, is the first test, the first major test for the new authorities. And unfortunately, it seems that they have failed at this test, sending very problematic factions to such a sensitive area and dealing with an insurgency that was expected to happen in such a way has kind of negatively affected all of the outreach efforts, especially the internal ones. So a lot of minorities, political groups that wanted to trust the new authorities, and the new authorities were building bridges with, right now are very hesitant and afraid to kind of take a leap of faith after what happened the last 2 days.
Now, these killings of civilians, which have been described by the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights as executions, they run counter to the interim president Ahmed al-Shara's promise to protect Syria's minorities. The government says that the massacres were carried out by groups from outside the region, officially unaffiliated with the operation. How credible is this claim?
It's not a very credible claim. So I can describe what happened is basically the new authorities have relied on very problematic armed factions. Some are affiliated with the Syrian National Army. Some are local armed factions. But overall, it relied on at least 3 or 4 very problematic armed factions. I can tell you, the moment we heard that some of these armed factions were sent to the coast, we were dreading a potential massacre. In addition to that, these factions, along with these factions, a lot of armed militias or just groups, let's say armed gangs, came as well, and they all combined committed committed these atrocities and massacres.
Now, if we can turn one moment to these pro-Assad insurgents, as they're being called, can they be distinguished from Syria's Alawite minority as a whole, or do they simply represent interests linked to the deposed former president?
So a very good question. I think the Alawite minority is being unfairly linked entirely with Assad. There was a lot of atrocities that happened over the last 14 years, and because there is no proper transitional justice and there's no proper kind of reconciliation program, the outcome of a 14 years war and the hate and the social rift is still very present. So you have, generally speaking, the Sunni population overall is looking negatively on the Alawite minorities. And this creates a very tense situation. If not dealt with, this is what we see. This is going to be repeated over and over. Now, going back to your question, are they linked with Alawites? The insurgents that committed the attacks were of course Alawites. However, they're not linked with societies. They don't have to reflect what their communities want. I can tell you, we conducted field work not too long ago. The communities are mostly focused on having security and on having their basic needs met. Even some people said like, we don't want anything political. We don't want to be involved in the politics. Just we want to be safe and and have our basic and eat basically. Yeah.
Now, what exactly do these factions expect to accomplish? Is this simply an attempt to sow chaos in Syria, or do they believe they can actually return to power in the country, or is it simply an attempt to lobby for perhaps regional autonomy or rights for the Alawites?
The insurgents, you mean, or
The insurgents, yes.
So the insurgency is still very young. They don't have any any clear and cohesive message, let's say. There's insurgents that wanted to kick away, to push away the new authorities out of the coast. There was a new insurgency that was launched on the 6th of March that they said they basically want to topple the regime, while lacking any capabilities to even pose a strategic threat on the coast. They're still not very organized. There's not a lot of them, and they're not well armed, and there's no proper command and control structure. They're still very young, and they're very much scattered, and they relied on ambushes really to inflict fatalities among the general security and the authorities.
Now, Syria today is, as well as being a patchwork of ethnicities, is also a geographical checkerboard, with the government holding the centre and east of the country, much of the coastal regions home to pro-Assad factions, the Kurds ruling over the northeast, and of course Israel is now occupying parts of the south. Is there any way for the Damascus government to get control over the whole country?
I mean, the Damascus government, it's very difficult for them. Like the situation is very difficult for them from the beginning. They got a destroyed economy. They got a kind of, as you put it very well, a difficult hand with internal and external powers. However, what they did the last 2 days made it even more difficult, and it created a fertile ground in the coastal areas and central area for external actors to be involved, for external actors to support proxies, especially ones like, for example, Iran, that already has the network with the former regime security forces and the former regime army. Right now, there's a fertile ground to fund such proxies and to go against Damascus at every step. Also, internal powers, they could align themselves with potential proxies to again go against any efforts from Damascus to unify and have a kind of go to a post-war phase.
Thank you very much for that, Nanara Hawatch, Senior Analyst for Syria at the International Crisis Group.